Welcome to Ever Onward. Today we have a missionary who just got home, and I'm so excited to introduce him. His name is Duncan Viehweg, and he got home how long ago?
I think it's currently less than 20 days.
Less than 20 days.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're fresh.
Because, I got home January 3rd, and it's currently January, 21st or
21st.
22nd?
Awesome. So yeah, Duncan, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from.
Okay, so I'm from Nibley, Utah. I don't know what do you want to know about me?
What do you like to do?
I love rock climbing. That's one of my favorite passions is to go rock climbing, just build my strength and be sore the rest of the week.
Yeah.
But
That checks out.
yeah, and I like to watch movies. I'm kind of a basic guy, and just spend time with my family, especially since getting home.
Yeah, totally. Well, and in full disclosure, I've known you for a little bit. You are friends with some of my kids, so it's been just a pleasure to get to know you. You've been such a great example to them, and it's been fun to see all of you guys evolve into missionaries and how that's come to be. So thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Of course, my pleasure.
Yeah. Okay, well, tell me, what factors played a role in you realizing I want to go on a mission?
That's a really good question. And so basically the factors that determined me serving a mission was truthfully my dad. He was the guy, and he would, when he would put me to bed, he would tell me these stories about his mission, and he'd just always be sharing about his mission and his experiences. And so growing up, I was like, I want to have those cool stories. On my mission, we called it dad lore, where it's just this your dad's secret stories that nobody knows about. And it's I growing up, I was like, I want that. I want those cool stories. And so I remember very clearly, it was kind of one day I was like, Dad, I'm going to serve a mission. I was 4 years old. I was like, I'm going to have those. And I'm so excited. I want to go, I want to get called somewhere so cool, foreign. I want to go swimming. And we were driving, and he's like, oh, you can't go swimming on your mission. I was like, I'm not going. I don't want to do it anymore.
Deal breaker.
Yeah. And then we were driving past the temple, and I just looked at the temple. I was like, okay, yeah, I can do it. That's probably fine.
Oh, that's
And
such a
so
cute story.
From time I was 4 onward, I just had this desire and made the decision to serve a mission.
Yeah,
And I never really looked back.
that's so cool. So what did you do to prepare to go on your mission?
For me, I prepared a lot by going to mission prep. I started as soon as I could. So when I was 15, I started going to mission prep. So I took about 3 years of it. But I wasn't just going to my church's mission prep every week. When they have it, I also found out that they had institute mission prep, which helped me so much, especially understanding different companions' teaching styles and just skills in explaining the lessons. It made it so instead of having one way explained to you in the MTC and then you going out and just using that, you had had a lot of different exposure.
Yeah.
So mission prep. In Institute Mission Prep helped a ton. I think personally my stake president challenged me to read the Book of Mormon before I went out too. And so it was kind of cool because my buddy started his mission. He told me about a challenge that they were doing. He's like, hey, you should join this challenge to read the Book of Mormon in 3 months. I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. Mm-hmm. And then it lined up perfectly to be the day I started home MTC. And so I started doing that, and I was really good the first month. It was 3 chapters a day. And then I pitted off the second month, and the last month I had a lot of catch up to do. But it was so good because I was spending hours a day just reading the Book of Mormon before my mission, and that got me on a spiritual level that helped me a lot, especially in the MTC, especially knowing scripture references in the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
And so people were like, how do you know your scriptures so well? And I'm like, well, I just got done reading the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
And I was reading it for anywhere between 4 to 10 hours because I'm a slow reader, a day.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so
That's
that was
awesome.
something that helped me prepare a lot.
Yeah, lots of time. And I know you made temple a priority too, going to the temple.
So true. Yeah, I think I remember me and my buddy, we had set the goal. We had said we want to go to the temple every week. We're like, yeah, but I just never have the time. And I was like, well, it was this flash of inspiration from the Spirit. I know it was. I just well, what are you doing next week, Thursday at 5 o'clock? And he's like, I don't know yet. I'm like, you're going to the temple with me. And so then we just, Thursday at 5 o'clock was our day. Mm-hmm. And hell or high water, we just always went Thursday at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And so I had a framing job, and they're like, they'd always want me working overtime. I'm like, okay, Thursday, I'm gone at 4:30, and then I'd rush home. I'd like sprint into the shower, and then we'd go.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was one thing that helped me so much, because just going to the temple and like, I don't know, the spiritual boost you get from the temple cannot be replicated anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So that was helpful. And then getting my friends and like getting into that pattern of inviting people, because the friend I originally started going with, he went on his mission, and then I was alone. I was like, I don't like going to the temple alone. This is boring. So then I just started inviting people, and that was actually how I ended up inviting Everett, which was so cool because he wanted to like work on getting his temple recommend. And I was like, oh, this is so cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's like your mission almost started before your mission, because there's this cool ripple effect, because you invited my son Everett to go to the temple. Then once you left on your mission, he continued your tradition of Thursday at 5:00, and he started inviting other people. And now my last son, now that my son's on his mission, my other son's like, hey, I'm taking over Everett's tradition, and I'm going to start going on Thursday. So you started something really cool with a fun ripple effect right there.
That is so cool. I didn't know it would reach that far.
Yeah.
At the time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, tell me about when you opened your call.
Okay, so that is such an experience for me, because before I could open my call, I had to do a lot of work, which was totally unnecessary work. Basically, I had like a bishop that didn't really like me, and so he like lied on church documents and said I did something that I didn't, and so I had to like deal with that for like 6 months. So I put my papers in May 1st, and then from May 1st to October 21st, I didn't get my call. And like, it was so hard seeing everyone like put their papers in and like a week later get their call.
Yeah.
And then like 2 weeks later get their call, and I'm like, it's been like a month. What's going on? So I called my stake president, and we found out about that. And he's like, that's not you at all. And I was like, no, it's not. What the heck? And so we had to work with that and like work through that. And that was an experience in and of itself. But I remember when I got my call, I was just like chilling in bed one morning and like reading like a comic online, and I like took a screenshot of it and it's like sent it to my mom, and she's like, no way. And so like it was just like go from that moment on, like just start. And so I like called my family. I just started telling everybody. I'm like, I finally got my call, and it was so exciting. And so what I wanted to do was like have this big opening with everybody there, just because of how much buildup it had been for me. But my family, they really wanted to just be there, like kind of a more private thing. And so I kind of ended up doing that. I did both actually, but I did it with my family first. And like opening the call, it was like this moment of like 6 months of work all coming together, and just like the sweetest release. Like I opened it and like couldn't get through the first words because I was just bawling, and like it felt so good, honestly. And so like when I got to Michigan, Detroit, I was so worried beforehand, like, oh, am I gonna get called somewhere lame? Like I don't want to go stateside. But when I finally got my call, I was like, I don't care where I go, I just want to go.
Yeah.
And so when I got Michigan, Detroit, I was like, let's go. And the funny thing is, I had a buddy who got called to the same mission like a couple months earlier, who had come home to be a service missionary. And I was like, dude, you could have stuck out. I would have loved that. But yeah, like that just felt so good, and it just made me bawl. It's one of the only times in my life where I like really bawled, like just getting through it and just the anticipation.
Yeah.
And then I just knew that's where I needed to be.
Yeah. I think that's such an awesome blessing from Heavenly Father. It feels like when you read, you always worry, where's it going to be? Where's it going to be? But it feels like once it comes out and you read those words, it sinks in your heart, and you know that that's where you're supposed to be.
I think it's just right.
It's just right. Just for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I do
awesome.
remember though, like right when I opened it in front of some friends, the first thing someone said was, don't get shot.
Yeah.
And I knew nothing about Detroit at that time.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, like it's like telling like a missionary, don't get robbed, you know?
Right. Yeah. Well, whenever it told me where you were going, my first thought was, is his mom okay? That's what I asked him because my heart was like, oh no, that sounds like a scary mission. But
And it might have been awful of me on my mission, but I told my mom everything. And so like this one time on my mission, we had this like massive shootout. You know, on like the 4th of July, when you hear like the grand finale of fireworks, that's what it sounded outside of our apartment, like with gunshots.
wow.
And like, I think the next day the next day was P-Day. And I was like, Mom, guess what happened? And like, people were always so concerned. But then like one day I asked my mom, she's like, oh, she's like, she was just chill with it. She just like, I know I'm praying for you and I know you're obedient. So you're fine.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, that's good. See, you were supposed to go there. Yeah. Well, kind of speaking of things along those lines, what are some of the hard things like about your mission or that you experienced in the mission?
right. That's a good question. So for me on my mission, one, it never met my expectations. So that was like the hardest one. I'd say probably over the course of my whole mission, that was the theme and the hardest thing was handling expectations. Because, right, like you, with my dad's stories, I was like, that's what it's like every day. He's just picked a couple. But like, then you get into MTC and it like, even with me, I'm a pretty optimistic person. Like it was kind of soul crushing. Like, can I even do this? And like, this is really hard. And so like, I remember one of my first weekly emails is like, nobody tells you about this. I'm giving you the insider scoop. Like, this is hard. Like, it's so much fun, but it's so hard. And then just managing those expectations, right? My mission is so different from my dad's. For example, like my mission in the past year, we had 29,000 people refer themselves to be taught. Whereas like my daddy like had 3 referrals like his whole mission. And so my days were spent driving from person to person, like stopping by the people who were interested rather than like going to a street and like knocking it.
Yeah.
And so like getting over that, like this isn't the same, was extremely difficult because I felt like I'm not doing what he did. I'm not a missionary.
Yeah.
And so that was one thing that was hard. And then like having the expectations on other missionaries to behave a certain way. When what helped me overcome that was just like in this one personal study, the Spirit just spoke to me. It was just like, just be you being like Christ. That's it. I was like, whoa, that's crazy.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Just be you being like Christ.
So that's like one of my things to say now. Just it's like, oh, like I need to be a certain way. It's like, no. Like don't I can't use specific names, but something a zone leader of mine said was like, don't be the next me, be the next you. And that changed a lot of like, oh, I'm not trying to be like so-and-so. I'm trying to be like Christ. And this is how he is like Christ, but how am I like Christ?
Yeah.
So that was one thing. And one thing I'm really grateful for with that preparation we talked about was that I didn't have to get used to the teaching aspect of it all. Like I had to deal with like being in the hood. I had to deal with like the culture change, like people telling me all the time, like, man, you white boys, like you shouldn't be here. And like you're going to get shot. And then like, but once we got into a house, I was comfortable because I knew what I was going to say.
Yeah.
And so like that was something I was grateful for because for a lot of other missionaries around me, that was a huge struggle where I was just struggling to like learn how to cook food.
Yeah.
So I'd say that was one of the biggest struggles. And then just expectations of other missionaries too on how we should act.
Yeah. I think that that's awesome. I think most missionaries struggle with some version of that, like an expectation of what it's going to be versus what it is. But I think the beautiful, like one of the most beautiful parts of a mission is where it starts to turn around and you're able to let it go and put it down and say, okay, Heavenly Father, I'm willing to change my expectations and like live this mission and this life that you need me to. And not just on a mission, but even in life, I think we have expectations about how all sorts of things will be, like how marriage is going to be or how raising kids is going to be or being a return missionary when I get home, how it's going to be. And I think that practice of letting it down and trusting God is like where things start to turn around and miracles and blessings really happen.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that helped me a lot is learning the difference between hopes and expectations. Hopes are great. I hope this is the way that it is. or I hope it's going to be a certain way. But having an expectation of that, well, if it doesn't live up to your hope, it's a lot easier to, for whatever reason, I can't explain it fully, but it's a lot easier to recover from a hope than it is an expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And then like the song, I'll go where you want me to be. I'll be what you want me to be.
Mm-hmm.
As like, there's just this line that says, it may not be at the battle's front, but my Lord has need of me. That was like one of the most powerful things because, I'm not at the battle's front right now, but I'm doing something that helps the battle, if that makes sense. And so like changing my expectation of like, I don't need to be the warrior all the time. I can be the guy that gets the ammo to the people who need it, right?
Exactly. Well, and I think one thing between hopes and expectations is expectations carry some kind of weight of like my worth and who am I. So if you have an expectation of how a mission's going to be and it doesn't fit that expectation, you start to internalize it and say, I must not be a very good missionary, or I must not be very good. Where if it was a hope, then you just like regroup and you keep going with that confidence of you're still okay, but that expectation squashes your self-confidence.
That is exactly how I would express it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like, no, I couldn't be said better, honestly.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, going along with that then, I know that missions are a combination of really hard growing moments, and they're also a combination of like blessings and miracles. So tell us maybe one or two of some really impactful things that happened on your mission that were a blessing or a miracle.
Right. Okay. So on my mission, I learned the importance of prayer and fasting a lot. And then like just talking to everyone. And so some of my favorite miracles was, at the beginning of my mission, I was put in an area called Belle Isle. And for all the missionaries in the Michigan-Detroit mission, if you're listening to this, it's the promised land. Like it is the best, one of the best places to serve. Everyone loves talking to you. Like they're just Detroiters. And something about Detroiters, you just love Detroiters. And so like going from that to a harder area kind of called like, I was in Howell East, but it was actually Brighton area. And it's a lot less humble people. And so I went from finding like in 1 month or one transfer, we found like, or talked to like 87 people that were interested in hearing back from us. And then in Howell, it was like one person a week was good. And I was like struggling so hard because I went from like the promised land to like this desert.
Mm-hmm.
And my mission president in an interview with me, he's like, Elder Viehweg, I really think you and your companion can find one person a day. I really think you can do that. And like his faith in me, and then me saying, okay, president, if you want me to do that, you have to make me a missionary promise. It enabled us to do that. And then, so he's like, okay, I promise if you pray for it every single prayer, every single day, like you will do that. And like right after that, within a week, we were finding one person every single day.
Wow.
And that was just like the theme of my whole mission was that there's always one person that needs to hear from us that day. So that was huge, was developing that kind of that faith to find.
Yeah.
And then with the prayer and the fasting for me, well, okay, back to the faith to find for like 1 second. You are, when I did that towards the end of my mission, this is why I love the God's timing thing, is we met a wonderful woman named Michelle. And Michelle was running off into her car and like just rushing, right? And I was like, I had this little thought like, go talk to her. I'm like, oh no, like she's getting into her car. I don't want to bother her. Like, I don't want to leave a bad impression of the church on her. But the Spirit's like, do it. And so I was like, okay. And I was used to talking to everyone. So I went up and I was like, hi, we're inviting people to church. Would you like to come this Sunday? And she was like so excited, so interested. And like, she's like, I don't have much time to talk, but here's my number. Call me tonight. And we ended up calling her that night, sharing the restoration with her. And like, she's like, so like, what do I do? Or like, what do I do if this is true? And we're like, well, you're going to want to get baptized. And then she came to church that like 2 days later. And then the Sunday after I left, so I got home on Friday, and then that Sunday she got baptized.
Wow.
And so like, that was like God's timing, talking to everyone, finding faith to find one a day. Like so many things accumulated just for Michelle. And like, if I had to do it all over again, like the struggle and all those things, I would, just for the people. And if God was like, you know what, Duncan, I need you for another 2 years. I'm like, can I have like 6 months and then like I will do it
Yeah.
because of the blessings and the lives I was able to help. But to the fasting and prayer, I learned that prayer can affect us personally in our own lives, but also the people around us a lot. And so one of the biggest miracles of my mission actually didn't happen in my mission. It happened because of my mission. And that was my aunt who was struggling to get pregnant. She had told me about that, and she had so many miscarriages, and it's just like, it was a really terrible situation. And I knew that God loved her. I knew that he had something better for her. And she had told me that she'd given up. She's like, I'm not going to have kids, even though it was something she'd always wanted. And I was like, no way. It's like, my faith is about to, like God, my God, like God is about to be so much better than what you think you are or what you deserve.
Yeah.
And so like I just started praying and I started fasting, and we were only in my mission allowed to fast once a month. So like I was like on it every time. And after like a year or two of like being just genuinely consistent about it, like now I've got a little cousin named Matilda, and she is just the cutest little baby ever. And so it makes me so happy, like that. And then a bunch of other fasting miracles related to that. I promised my aunt, gave her a missionary promise that, you know, if she would go to the temple once a month, you know, they'd get approval for their loan and like a bunch of other cool blessings. And I'm not saying go to temple and you get a cool house, but what I'm saying is like when a missionary is inspired by the Spirit, they can make cool promises and they will happen if you have faith in God. And so like seeing those miracles of like prayer, fasting, and missionary promises was one of my personal favorite miracles for my whole mission.
Wow. I think one of my favorite things about talking to people who have just come home from missions is seeing all of the little things that they have taken into their heart that will change the trajectory of their life, right? So I'm like hearing you say that you have this testimony of God's timing and this understanding of God's timing that you didn't have before, and this testimony of fasting and prayer, and then also managing expectations versus hopes. I think that that will play a huge role in your life as you go forward. So for anyone out there that's thinking about serving a mission, or is on a mission but is like maybe struggling a little bit, do you have some advice that you would love to give them?
Absolutely. Okay, so I struggled. Okay, it sounds like I loved my mission, and I really did. But for the first year of my mission, I genuinely hated it. Like, I was like, wow, this is dumb. Mm-hmm. Like, I shouldn't hate my mission, but I really do. And there's some things that contributed to change. But I think at like the 6-month mark, I was like ready to go home, which was so frustrating me because I worked so hard to get out there. And I was like, man, I can't do this. Like I was in a quad squad that like felt like everyone hated me. It felt like my whole district hated me. Companion and I weren't getting along, like nothing. And I remember having this like night where I just like prayed for like an hour and a half, just bawling in this closet. And I didn't get any answer. I didn't get any peace. I was like, well, this is dumb. Like angels are supposed to come.
Right.
And then what ended up happening was my zone leader came and he saw how bad it was. And so then he planned another exchange with me, and he took me out of the situation for a day and gave me some peace. And that was like my little island of like, I can do this. And so like my advice is absolutely serve a mission. And my advice is do whatever you can to stay out there. Because I know that if I would have gone home at 6 months, none of the people I helped get baptized would have ever gotten baptized. Mm-hmm. Or like I wouldn't have been there for it, right? Which is my own personal blessing. Like it was like after 7 months that I started helping people get baptized, right? Mm-hmm. And so your decision to serve a mission affects the salvation of others. And so do your best to stick it out, but at the same time, seek personal revelation. I've had so many friends receive personal revelation to go home, and it changed like so much about my perspective about going home, but also just like they came home and they did so much. Like my buddy who got the call to the Michigan-Detroit mission, he came home and he did so much for people. And I was talking to him about it when I got home, and he's like, it's like, man, like sometimes I really regret my decision, like ending my mission at the year mark, or, you know, even coming home. I was like, well, did you pray about it? And he's like, yeah. I like, how did you feel? I felt like I should have come home. I felt like I should have ended at the year mark. I was like, your answer doesn't change just because your life does.
Right.
Like, that answer was your answer, and you got to stick with that, and you got to trust that because of God's timing.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, my answer was stay out there, stick it out. Here's your little light at the end of the tunnel. But so my ultimate advice is to seek personal revelation and then just trust it, because you really can't mess up God's plan at all.
Yeah.
Like, we're not that good. And that was like one of the things I had to learn on my mission is like, you're not good enough to frustrate God.
Yeah.
Like, or like ruin his plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so just ask for personal revelation. God wants to talk to you, and then stick with it. Because I know my buddy's decision with his mission was entirely inspired. Another buddy, he got revelation, his mom got revelation, and his mission president all got the same revelation out of the blue that he needed to come home. And he's done so much for the people here.
Mm-hmm.
And I could give you a couple more examples, but I'll spare you.
Yeah.
And it's just, so stick it out, because you won't have that opportunity to serve in the same way.
Yeah.
But be willing to receive personal revelation, because, yeah. And then my last story is just like, I loved my mission towards the end. And at the beginning of my mission, I had decided like, I want to extend. And then as I got closer, I was like, well, everyone prays about extending. I already want to. So like, I know the answer I'm going to get, but I should just pray about it. And like, we'll see what happens. And I prayed about it, and I got the answer not to extend. And I was like, what? Like, I got nightmares about like, just whatever. Right. And I was like, okay, like I won't extend. And I stuck with that decision. And I'm really glad I did, because it lined up. A lot of things have lined up perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
Just like God's timing.
Yeah.
So that's my advice. Seek personal revelation.
That's awesome. Trusting God's timing, because he has this really cool path of evolution that we can't see. We can't see the end from the beginning, but he can. And so between personal revelation and trusting him, and then being willing to go through the hard times, whether that's sticking it through or coming home, because either one is really hard.
It is, truthfully.
I think just trusting that he can evolve us into something that we could have never been before.
Absolutely. And the patience you have to exercise in those circumstances, I think, is just remembering patience isn't giving up. It's just enduring throughout.
Yeah.
It's like giving that constant valiant effort, but it's enduring through the situation. Because like, if I wasn't patient, I wouldn't have gone out, because like that 6 months sucked like, before. And then like, if I wasn't patient, the 6 months on my mission would have, like, things wouldn't have worked out. And so just like all those things that you said, and just like understanding patience throughout all of it. Like, just because you're going through a bad thing doesn't mean you're a bad person. It's just, sometimes it's just part of the process.
Yep.
It's like working out. Your muscles get sore, but it doesn't mean you did it wrong just because it hurts.
Right.
And that's something we need to understand in our personal mission experiences, and like even coming home.
Yeah.
Because I'm definitely not what everyone would think of as a return missionary, because my mission president told me, like, my last transfer, he's like, okay, prepare to go home. Like, don't worry about it. Like, I know, I trust you and your work ethic. I want you to start preparing to go home. So now I'm like a very different return missionary from a lot of people. I'm like more adjusted.
Yeah.
And people are like, what? And I'm just like, I don't know. What do you want me to be? Awkward, weird? Like, I'm not. I'm like, when I got off the plane, I was so excited to give everyone hugs. Like,
Yeah.
because that's just, I love giving people hugs. And so gave my family hugs. And then like, after I got released, I gave my friends hugs, and everyone was like, you're not weird. And I'm like, you'll see later that I am. But like, when it comes to giving hugs, I'm not. And it's just because, and so be willing to be different. One of my favorite companions, he said, be willing to be a paradox. So
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on our podcast today. I feel like the things that you shared were just awesome and will help a lot of people. And I just appreciate your willingness to come.
Of course. Thank you so much. It was such a good conversation.
Yeah. Thanks, Duncan.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. As a nonprofit organization, we are able to provide this information for free through donations and generous support to our cause. So if you would like to learn more or would like to get involved, please visit our website, missionarywellnesscenter.org. We'll catch you next week.